Hi, this is your host, Laura Powers, and I'm so pleased to have Steph Parejamaas on the show. She is a love coach. She also does hypnotherapy, and we're here to talk about a lot of fun things to do with relationships and love and her work. Thanks so much for being a guest on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I am so excited to be talking with you and just sharing your energy.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we just had a podcast interview for your podcast, and it was amazing. You're an awesome host. I definitely encourage everyone to check out that episode. And can you tell people a little bit about your podcast, the name, and what it's about?
For sure. So my podcast is called Beautifully Changed, and it is all about relationships, all sorts of different types of relationships and how we show up in them and how we can enhance them because we all want the good stuff, right? So you can find it on any of the podcasts, and our episode, which is phenomenal. You shared so many great things about our relationship with our parents, right? So good. And we can apply basically that to anywhere in our life. And anyway, that'll be out next week, which I'm not sure what the date is, but Tuesday.
And the week of the 4th.
Yes, the 7th. It'll be available on July 7th.
Yes. Amazing. Yeah, it was great to talk with you. And I think this is such a timely time to talk about relationships because there's lots of things shifting in terms of relationships. One of the things that COVID-19 and all the societal changes is happening is getting us to really reassess, make changes, align with what's important. So I'd love maybe if we could just start by that, like, doing what you do, what have you seen that's happening for people right now with everything happening?
Well, I think that's a great question because a lot of people are starting to almost find this like inner strength starting to stir up in them where they're becoming a little bit more confident and identifying that, you know what, I do bring stuff to the table. I am a great catch. Do you know what I mean? And also when they're realizing this, they are starting to express their needs more and share what it is that they actually want and what they need. And they're getting tested in a sense by the past coming up and saying, are you sure you really want to make some shifts here? Because we can go back to what you already know. We can go back to what's really comfortable. And it's giving people the opportunity to really reflect on what do they really want. So I think that's huge.
Yeah, I do think that in a lot of ways, everything that's happening around is just magnified. It's like when we level up, everything gets magnified. And that might sound a little strange, but like imagine, let's say you hit a golf ball and you hit it a little bit. If your direction, wherever your direction you're hitting it, it's going to go a little. If you hit it really hard, it's going to go really far in whatever direction you're pointing it in. And so that's what I feel like is happening is our energy has shifted up and everything is showing up harder. It's all stuff that was there before, but now we're just like, whoa. And I think we're seeing that politically. We're seeing that in terms of some of the issues with, violence and racial tensions. Like this has all been under the surface, but now it's like, hello, we can't ignore this anymore because now our energy is putting everything forward really strongly. And it's also so that it can shift and be released and so that we can have better situations. So fascinating time to be witnessing all of this, but I'd love to hear, what got you into this? This is a very interesting area.
Well, so I'll answer that in 1 second. I want to reflect on what you said with the, it's almost like we're getting this invitation to love more and to really forgive some of the past hurts. So that's one thing I've seen a lot coming up is people that have never been able to really see the hurt that they've caused. They're now starting to identify it. And we're seeing that, as you mentioned, in a lot of the racism or even the protests and all of this stuff, like all this new awareness is coming up. And that's also inviting us to make decisions on, are we going to choose love? Are we going to choose hate? And are we going to forgive or are we going to choose resentment? And so I've seen that a lot too. And I definitely am just feeling the goodness that people are stepping into. And I just love it. It makes me so excited.
And I just want to make one comment on that before we go into your history too, which is that I think when there's anger, not always, but a lot of times it's actually coming up when there's a boundary that has not been honored. So I think this is also a time of really putting forth our boundaries, individually as well as a society of like, no, we're not going to accept hate. We're not going to accept, different treatment of people, for their skin color, for example. We're just saying, no, like we're angry because this is a boundary that should have been there that is not happening. And it's often painful, but it's so important. So even though, gosh, it's such a hard time, and I have so much compassion and I'm really wanting for help for the people that are going through so much pain right now. And I feel it empathically myself that this is still, it's actually a sign of things shifting in a better way, and we will get through this. And I'm just asking so much help from the angels. Okay, so now your story. Thank you.
Yes, no, I think, yeah. So my story is, I've always been a little bit different. I feel like I was, how when you hear that term, like the black sheep of the family, though I feel like I was like the only white sheep in my family, if that makes sense, because I was so different, but I wasn't the rule breaker. I was the one who was the sensitive, just wanted to let people know that they matter and that they're loved, even when they make mistakes, even when they show up in an imperfect way, that you can be an imperfect person and you can still be loved. And so this was just something that was in me my entire life. And so just growing up, I was always just like this relationship sounding board for my friends, and I just showed up a little bit different. And then I decided, well, I had thought I was going to be a nurse, right? Because I had history of being sick and in and out of the hospital a lot when I was little. And I was like, the nurses made my stay so much better. Nurses are love. I want to be a nurse. But then I could not do it because it was way too sad. So I just could not be, I think it would have destroyed me to work in the hospital or in a medical field every day because of what I would take home with that. So anyway, I heard about this field called Health and Human Development when I went to college. And I was like, what? There's a career field that does this? Are you kidding me? Sign me up. So I dove right in, and like I did a lot of family science, and then it took me to, I did AmeriCorps and I loved it. And then I ended up doing my master's in marriage and family therapy. So I got to really experience sitting in a room with people in their most vulnerable state, sharing stuff with people that they may have never shared ever before with anyone. And again, they're wondering, am I going to be loved? Am I going to be okay? Like, can I have this blemish in my life and still be someone who's going to be worth seeing and worth loving? And so it was like really just showing up for people and letting them know like, hey, you matter no matter what's happened. And life doesn't always have to look this way. And so, but I didn't want to stay in therapy because my husband and I and my son moved around a lot, and it's really hard to transfer your therapy license everywhere. So then I was like, wait, I can do coaching. And so I decided to do coaching and use like hypnosis within that to really like kind of powerhouse people's transformations. And so that's kind of where I am. And I just really love working with people, identifying that once you love yourself on a whole new level, then you get to, as you talk about, receive love in a whole new way. And so that's kind of my journey in a nutshell, in a long nutshell.
Yeah, I think, we all find the way that we are helping or meant to help, and we can transition and shift as we are going through our journey. And I do think this sort of traditional kind of teaching, helping careers, we think of like doctor, nurse, teacher, but there's so many other ways to do it. And it sounds like you were able to kind of go through that process. And I agree with you completely that, with hypnosis and meditation, there's all these ways we can kind of help access that sort of programming or unconscious mind or subconscious mind that can be so helpful. And if we're just focusing on the sort of logical, kind of the where part of that, we may not be getting at the root of a lot of what's really going on.
Yeah, I do love that you're able to just be like, okay, we're going to just take a break for a second. Our conscious mind's going to just come over here and take a little vacation for a moment. And then we're going to dive into your subconscious and reprogram and kind of retrain your brain to think in a way that is actually going to benefit you instead of hold you back. So it's really fun. I love it. It's really cool to see people who feel like, I just don't know what to do. I'm hopeless. I'm so stuck. And then within like 1 or 2 sessions already start to see progress, and you can see them start to feel more confident and just like, I don't know, start changing their life. It's so cool.
That is so cool. So, we talked before we were chit-chatting, before we started the show, about relationships and how relationships really show us our relationship with ourselves and the world. And I think this is really important because if you're stuck in relationships, it's definitely a deeper thing that you're probably being shown about yourself. Can you talk a little bit about that and your experience with that with yourself or with clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. So here's kind of where I think I disagree with what some people say that you hear a lot, is that you can only love someone if you love yourself. And I don't think that's true. What I think is true is that, because if you think about it, when you're hard on yourself, haven't you still felt like you've loved someone? So for me, it's more about how you have your relationship with yourself, how you love yourself determines if you'll believe someone else can love you.
Oh, yes. That really resonates for me. Mm-hmm.
Right? So, because I think about when I had the lowest self-view of myself, I was still loving people. I might have had different expectations for them, but I still loved them. And I do think that love was real. One of the things when we say that statement, you can't love someone unless you love yourself, to me, that just strengthens the self-doubt that we already have. And you know how important your intuition is, and believing yourself and trusting yourself. And if I'm hearing the message that, well, you don't love yourself, so you can't love anyone else, then that already makes me, that like amplifies my distrust for myself, because it's like, well, I thought I loved this person, but I didn't love this person. They said I didn't love this person, right? And so instead it's like, no, if you really break it down and look at it, and from all the clients I've ever worked with, that's really what it comes to, is like, well, they broke up with me, so they never really loved me. That proves they didn't love me because they don't want to be with me forever, right? When it's like, well, maybe things shifted. It doesn't take away the fact that you were valuable to them and that they did love you. They don't have to be with you forever for that to be a proven truth, right? And so when you start to identify that you are a lovable person and that there are things that you love about yourself, and you're not running from the mirrors, and you're not running from the people that actually have the qualities you want, and you're not sabotaging those type of relationships, and then you open up space to say, you know what? I do deserve a fantastic relationship, because I'm going to treat myself in a way that feels really good, and it's going to come from me first, so that when I have a relationship with someone who is showing up in a way that feels really good to me, I'm going to receive it instead of push it away. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think one of the things that happens is whatever our sort of patterns, weaknesses, vulnerabilities are, they really show up hard in relationships. This is where we do the most kind of like soul work. And so much of what we experience is based on the story we tell ourselves about why things are happening. And I think this is really, really important, because we create this story, this narrative about things and what they mean, and it's usually not good. As we shift, hopefully it can get better, but for most of us, whatever we're telling about relationships, about ourselves, is usually a lot of what I would call, kind of negative self-talk. And I just want to share, because it feels like important, that I have been given the message from angels and spirit guides that our actual true thoughts and feelings are actually very loving and positive. And if we're experiencing this kind of negative thoughts about ourselves and others, it's likely that we've picked that up from somewhere. There, in my perspective as a psychic, there are entities. So there's beings that are of the light, there are beings that are not of the light, and like they will influence us and kind of parasitically feed on these negative thoughts and feelings. And as we learn to identify that and think like, is that really true? That's one of the first things I question when you have a negative thought about yourself or others. Be like, is that necessarily true? Do I know that for a fact? Am I just like creating this in my mind, or whatever we think of as our mind? Because I feel like that's a huge part of this. Like, someone didn't call, therefore I'm a terrible person. They don't love me, whatever, fill in the blank. And that may or may not be the case. They may also not be ready for, who knows, there may be a lot behind it. But the more we kind of go down these tracks that are not necessarily true, and we're just kind of creating in our mind, the worse it can feel for us, regardless of the truth. So I'd love to hear any tips or tactics you have, because I think this is a huge issue for people where they're just getting wrapped up in like all this sort of crazy mind talk that can happen.
Yeah, self-talk I think is key, because that's gonna, like you said, it creates this story, and then our story creates our reality, and it sets our expectations, and it sets what we look for, right, in our relationships, because we want to prove our story to be correct, right? So we'll be, see, I knew it.
Right.
You were late. I don't matter, right? Where it's like, oh no, like
yes, exactly.
Actually got a flat tire, so it really, you know what I mean? But we're like, oh, you got a flat tire because the universe hates me, right? So we're just continuously try to prove this story. So our self-talk is huge. And one of the things that it can feel like is when you hear people say, well, just say more positive things. And it's like, okay, well, I tried that and it didn't work. Well, of course, because you got to give yourself time. I like to think about, you have to retrain your brain.
Yeah.
Because you know what, the very first time, I'm just going to use this as one because it's a very common one that people think of as like, I'm stupid, right? Or I need to, because like so many people think they have to be perfect, right? So you can't make a mistake. If you make a mistake, that means you're stupid, you're worthless, you're not good enough, right? It goes down this whole little pattern. So the first time someone said to you, or you heard, I'm stupid, you didn't say, by golly, you're right, I am stupid. You were like, right? You didn't believe it, but you said it so many times that it became your reality. You do believe it now. So when you say to yourself, no, actually, I'm phenomenal, I'm brilliant, your first reaction is going to be like, what? No, that feels weird, right?
Right.
Because why would you believe it? You've just spent the last 10 years beating yourself up verbally. So it's going to take a little bit of time to all of a sudden, to not feel like it's all of a sudden like, okay, poof, now I believe this. So I like to think of it as, so if you're at a 1, like let's say there's a scale of like 0 to 10 on your self-talk, and 10 is like all the good stuff where you just think you're this incredible being and you love yourself and you're just like delight in who you are, right? And 0, the complete opposite. Well, if you're at a 1, you're not going to a 10 immediately. So you're going to start at a 1 and you're going to think, oh, I'm stupid. Catch that thought, right? Oh, wow, I just said that to myself. And as you said, is that true? Is that, well, actually, it's not true, because I learned how to cook this meal that I wanted to cook. And if I was stupid, I wouldn't have been able to do that, whatever, right? And then you just want to find the next best thought. So just kind of start going down that lane. So you go from that 1 to a 2. And then from the 2 to the 3. And then you just work your way up one step at a time until eventually you get to those 10s, and those 10s becomes your reality. Now, I'm sure since you're in this world, you know of Louise Hayes. Louise Hay? Mm-hmm. Yeah, right? And she has a thing where she does affirmations, do 400 times a day, which seems like a ton, but really when you think about how many thoughts you have in a day, 400 is not that much. So really what you could do, and this is what I assign a lot of my clients who are struggling with, confidence or self-love, is I want you to pick an affirmation such as, I'm learning to love myself, my soul loves me, I'm a good person, I'm letting go of this idea of being perfect. Pick an affirmation and go on a 30-minute walk and say that affirmation the entire time you're walking. And that's your 400 times per day. It took you 30 minutes. And at the end of it, you're going to feel really good. Right? So one of the first things I started saying with myself was, I'm a badass. I don't know if it's okay to say that on your podcast.
Yes, you're fine.
Yeah. So I would say I'm a badass, and I would do it on the treadmill. Right. And I would just say it over and over and over. And at first it was kind of like, not really. But then I just started doing it. And now I'm like, you literally feel a shift in your body on like a cellular level. Right. And there's research out there that shows, it's on water.
Oh
So,
yeah, messages in the water. Yeah.
yes. And what
Yeah.
are we mostly made out of?
Water, totally. Mhm.
Water. And so our body, like I really like to think like your cells are listening to you. And so what you're saying to yourself literally matters because it is transforming your body on a cellular level. And so it's so important to say good things about yourself. And it's really as simple as catch the thought, transform the thought, right? Just pick something that feels a little bit better than a little bit worse. And it starts moving you in the right direction. And so, what I also wanted to say is like when you get really caught up in that being perfect, because so many people think I'm not good enough, right? If this person really knew me, they wouldn't love me anyway, right? But if you are not showing up as yourself, who are they loving anyway? They're loving the act that you're putting on. And then
Right.
when all of a sudden you do feel comfortable enough to show up, they're like, who's this person? You know, this isn't who I fell in love with. I fell in love with this other person that you were pretending to be because that person felt safe. And then you say, oh, well, see, I'm not lovable, where it wasn't you at all. It was this whole brand new person that you like snuck into when it felt comfortable. And then
Right.
it was like, you know, they don't know who you are. It's like I mean, you may look the same, but what you're doing and how you're showing up is completely different. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I really want to highlight that point you said about, you're not going to go from like 0 to 10, like immediately in terms of retraining your brain. Yeah. I mean, I think we all recognize we wouldn't like go from completely sedentary lifestyle to running multiple marathons at once. Like you gotta ramp up and get everything ready. Same, the same thing. You wouldn't like go to the gym and go from nothing to, working out for 10 hours in a row and expecting to like look like a, professional athlete right away. Like
Right.
we gotta shift things. And I found that it really is a journey. Like I think when I started as a psychic, I'm so telepathic, so I didn't realize how much of what were my thoughts, and I'm kind of putting that in quotes, were things I was picking up on versus things that were being generated by myself.
Mm.
And over time, I realized that was happening, but it still took a while for me to sort of retrain me in terms of what I allowed and accept in my sort of mental field, what I felt, how to think about myself. And yeah, it is a process, and we should have patience with it. And also, yeah, just because you don't go to the gym one time and then you don't not like muscle bound, doesn't mean you should stop because it's not working. Like it takes some time. So
Right, exactly. So with that, it's very much whatever you do consistently is going to shape you. So even if you just like, if 30 minutes seems too big of a time, because that's more like a 10, right? Maybe you start
right.
off with 1 minute. And I do think mirror work is so important. And again, this has to be consistent though. If you could set your timer for 2 minutes a day and just go lock eyes with your gorgeous self in the mirror and just say, I am good enough. I am good enough over and over for those 2 minutes. And you do that for, at least a week. But if you can hang into there for 90 days, it'll change your life. Just 90
Mm,
days, 2 minutes a day, life changing. You know what I mean? But some people don't want to do that because it seems too easy, right? Because it's so easy not to do, right? That they won't do it. But it's like, it's so easy to do, right? Heck, if you wanted to, like, when you're stopped at a stoplight, just look in your mirror while the light's red and say it then if you wanted to. Like find a way to put it into your day, because if you find a way to make it consistent, it's really going to change your life. And it's so, so good. And I also wanted to say, not only is it what you're saying to yourself, but it's what you're listening to.
oh,
So
totally.
that's why I think like whether it's the podcast, the audiobook, the TV shows, the conversations, if you're around people who insult themselves a lot, like I like to think of it as you have to also prepare yourself for a mental block. So if you hear someone say, I'm stupid, I'm just going to go with that one. Okay. So if you hear someone say, I'm stupid, you mentally block it with like, I'm amazing. So you
Mm,
just have a statement that's like ready to go, because your mind, your body, your cells doesn't know who that statement is directed to. So they're just going to take it in. So that's why it's also so important to hang around people that, as we were talking about when you were sharing on my podcast, is like, how do you feel around the people you're with? And so it's so important that you're around people who are saying really good things about you, about other people, about themselves, because your mind, your body is taking all that in and making it reality. So if you're around people who are complaining all the time, either you got to shine really, really bright when you're with them, or you got to limit your time with them. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think it's about energy and what you allow in, and having that awareness. And you say kind of block it, I say shielding, but it's the same idea. Like,
okay.
Oh, I don't, whether that's a word or whatever, it's an energy ultimately. And like, yeah, I want that, or I don't want that in my fields. And like, also asking the angels for help. Archangel Michael is really, really powerful for blocking and clearing in particular. So yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I love how you asked that. Like, do I want that or do I not want that? Because yeah, that is so good. And it also helps you learn your intuition, right? Your yeses, your nos. And I think that's something too, like if you're having just kind of like a really, I don't know, I like to think of it kind of like a frumpy day where you're just feeling kind of like, for that day.
Yeah.
When I have days like that, all day long, I just ask myself, what would feel good right now? Yeah. What do I want to do right now in this moment? And I don't have this expectation that I have to like save the world that day. Maybe I'm just, finding some joy in the moment. And I also like, if I come up with, what do I want to do right now? And it's like, I want to sit and watch a show on Netflix, something that's going to make me laugh. That's what I do. And I don't guilt myself about it.
Totally. No, I think that's really important because it's all about energy ultimately. Yeah, there's different ways it comes in, but to me, what we eat, the people that are around, our thoughts, like all that, it's energy when you really get down to it from like a quantum physics perspective. Oh my gosh. Well, I feel like we could just talk a long time, and I think we're just going to have you back to talk more on the show because I really love your vibe and our connection. I'd love see if there's anything else you'd like to share with our listeners today.
I would just share with them that remember, you do not have to be perfect. No one gave you that assignment. Your soul did not come down to this earth to be perfect. Your soul came to play and to learn and to enjoy. And you will not be able to do that if you have this idea that you need to be perfect. So make those mistakes, try the new things, go towards what's pulling on your heart.
Yeah, another way to look at that too is I think we already are perfect. Like we really are in a way of like, we're just this, having this amazing experience. And so much of it is just for us to shift our perspective and just love that which we are and love, the world. But gosh, this has been so great. I love your energy. I love your perspective. It's been really wonderful. If people want to learn more or connect with you, your podcast, everything that you do, what's the best way for them to do that?
So my podcast is Beautifully Changed. My website is beautifullychanged.com, and you can find me on Instagram at Beautifully Changed.
I love the name too. It's great.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today, Steph.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
And thank you everybody for listening. If you'd like more information about me, you can go to my website, healingpowers.net. You can find me at Twitter at Laura Powers, Instagram at Laura Powers 44, and on Facebook. Thanks for listening.